The war on the motorist continues as drivers are being ripped off when they're parked by unscrupulous operators. Private parking firms have doubled the number of tickets handed to drivers since the pandemic, with a record 16.5 million parking charge notices last year, about 45,000 every day or one every 2 seconds. This is backed up by DVLA, which receives £2.50 every time an operator asks for a motorist details, which has become an important part of its funding. And so the government seems to support the unfair targeting of motorists. Demands reaching up to £100 or £170 if passed to debt collectors. Motorists could be facing bills of £1.6 billion a year just on parking charges, with faulty machines and aggressive charges blamed by some, and an increase in parking sites cited by the companies. So are private parking firms the newest entries in using the motorist as a cash machine? Well, I'm joined now by the motoring expert and managing director of MotorVise, Fraser Brown. Fraser, thank you for joining me. Parking tickets given by private companies aren't the same as ones given by councils, are they? Could you explain the difference?
Yes, it's very, very different in terms of what they are. Effectively, a parking charge notice is an invoice because you've entered a piece of land that has a sign on it. And by entering that piece of land with a sign on it, you're entering into a contract with the private landlord to enable you to engage in their parking services that they're providing. And the thing that appears on your windscreen, or alternatively, if you get it in the post, which is what most of them do because they use automatic number plate recognition cameras to indiscriminately fire these things out in an automated fashion without any human intervention. They just end up in the post via an automatic lookup with the DVLA to establish your private address, and they just send you an invoice. And the invoice will be for a figure that's far in excess of what you would have had to have paid if you paid for whatever the charge was when you entered the land at the time. So yeah, very different to a penalty charge notice, which is issued to you by a local council, for which there are statutory powers that sit behind that, rather than you just entering into a contract with a private landlord.
And with a council, there's a proper appeal system that essentially operates on legal principles, whereas with the private landlords, there's an ombudsman that they don't all use, and there are a couple of appeals companies that basically support the charging companies, don't they? They're not highly respected. They're pretty Dodgesville.
Well, what I would say is if you've ever actually tried to contest one of these invoices that you get through the post, very often it's almost impossible to get hold of a human being, either on the telephone. If you write to them, they will by default automatically reject your whatever the claim is on the first, possibly the second, or even the third attempt, even if it's on valid grounds, is my personal experience. And then what happens in the fullness of time, if you ignore it, you will end up possibly with some kind of court papers coming through your door. And the worst case scenario, if you continue to ignore the notifications coming through to you, is you could end up in court or potentially have a judgment made against you in your absence with a county court injunction. Now, when I work in car dealerships across the land doing my consultancy work, one of the things I see quite often is people coming into the dealership to get finance for their next car. And what we find is that they have got a county court injunction against them, some of which they claim to not know about, the customers claim to not know about them. And occasionally we find that it's been a parking charge notice that's basically stopping them from getting finance or a mortgage. It can be very difficult outcomes.
But people are entitled to go to court. They don't have to accept the appeals process. They can insist on their day in court, and the courts are actually pretty sensible and reliable and don't tend to give in to this type of bullying from the parking firms.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. If ultimately you have a valid reason for having been there, or you have extreme circumstances and you do go to court and actually don't ignore the notifications and you go and turn up and have your day in court, or potentially get some advice, potentially from somewhere like Citizens Advice, they can give great advice on things like this, and you go and have your day, yes, invariably I find that the courts are very reasonable in these circumstances. So, you know, I think the key thing is if you get one of these, don't bury your head in the sand and kind of address it. But ultimately, these are automated money-making machines by third-party businesses that work on behalf of private landlords. And I think what we're seeing is exactly as you described. It's just, again, feeding off the poor motorist that is being used as a cash cow.
All right, Fraser, thank you very much.